Afternoon, everyone. I want to first welcome our guests who are here from the St. Albans School of Public Service. Happy to have you all here. Hope you enjoy the tour and look forward to talking with you all afterwards. Got a large crowd over here. More than the reporters in the room, I've noticed, so maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I do want to begin by recapping the Secretary's very productive trip to Poland, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and also updating everyone on our conversation with Congress regarding the NDAA. Let me begin, first of all, with the trip. On Friday and Saturday of last week, Secretary Carter joined President Obama at the NATO summit in Warsaw, where the alliance moved forward on several key fronts, including taking the next steps to shift from reassurance to deterrence in the face of Russian aggression on NATO's eastern flank, projecting stability to NATO's southern flank, particularly with respect to the fight against ISIL, and a continued commitment from NATO members for the resolute support mission in Afghanistan. On Monday, the Secretary, as you know, made a previously unannounced visit to Iraq to get a first-hand update on the progress that Iraqi security forces are making in the fight against ISIL, with the help of the international coalition, including the United States. The Secretary met with commanders, including Lieutenant General McFarland, where he received an operational update on the campaign both in Iraq and in Syria. He also had very productive meetings with Iraqi Prime Minister Abadi, Minister of Defense, and Minister of Defense Obeidi, where he commended Iraqi security forces for their substantial gains in recent weeks, most notably the successful clearing of Fallujah and the capture of the strategically significant airfield at Kiara West, which will serve as a major logistical hub for the push to Mosul. The capture of that airfield was identified months ago as one in a series of next plays in the military campaign plan for defeating ISIL that the Secretary submitted to President Obama. The Secretary wrapped up his visit to Iraq by speaking with U.S. troops who are deployed there. In that conversation, he announced the deployment of an additional 560 American troops to Iraq to further enable Iraqi security forces. The primary mission of these additional forces will be to establish a base of operations at Kiara West from which to support the envelopment and eventual collapse of ISIL control over Mosul. Next week, the campaign will take another step forward when the Secretary hosts the latest meeting of ministers of defense from coalition nations. The gathering will take place at Joint Base Andrews on July 20th, and there'll be a similar gathering of foreign ministers at the State Department the next day to discuss other crucial aspects of the counter-ISIL effort, including political and economic actions to stabilize areas recently freed from ISIL control. The Secretary wrapped up his trip with a visit to Afghanistan, where he met with our commanders, including General Nicholson. He also met with Afghan President Ghani, Chief Executive Abdullah, as well as the Minister of Defense Habibi and Minister of Interior Jahid during that visit. These meetings were focused on the improved performance of Afghan national defense security forces and the implementation of President Obama's decisions to adjust our troop level in Afghanistan next year and the authorities that those troops are using. The Secretary ended that stop by talking to U.S. troops about the road ahead in Afghanistan and the important mission they're carrying out on behalf of the American people. Now, I would like to draw your attention to a letter that the Secretary sent today to the leadership of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees for their consideration during their conference on the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. The Secretary makes clear in this letter our desire to work with Chairman McCain, Chairman Thornberry, and other members of Congress on this important legislation, but he also spells out our concerns with the legislation under consideration. I'd like to highlight three broad areas of serious concern on behalf of the Department. First, the House's bill's funding approach, which redirects $18 billion in wartime funding for the fight against ISIL and other operations, putting that money instead toward manpower and equipment the Department has not requested and also does not provide the money to sustain those purchases. And second, a series of provisions in both bills that in some amount to excessive and unproductive micromanagement of the Department, including, for example, the Senate bill's division of acquisition, technology, and logistics functions into separate stovepipes. And third, provisions in both bills that appear to ignore the constrained resource environment we live in right now and reject critical savings and force posture updates that senior civilian and uniformed leaders judge have proposed, while the bills at the same time include provisions that will impose excessive costs and reduce benefits for our military families. Congress needs to join the Department in making the tough budget choices that are necessary in this environment. And we'll be happy to provide the full text of that letter to reporters at the conclusion of this briefing And again, it's important to note that Secretary Carter's message to Congress reiterates that if legislation in the current form of either the House or the Senate bill is presented to the President, the Secretary will recommend a veto of that legislation. And I also want to emphasize that the House's treatment of war funding is not the only serious concern we have with these bills. The letter makes clear that there are many other issues in both bills that would generate a veto recommendation from the Secretary to the President. With that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Tara.
I'm sure you've seen that the media arm of the Islamic State is saying that Omar the Chechen was killed actually in Mosul and not in the earlier March airstrike, as the Pentagon reported earlier this year. Could you, I guess, reconcile those two versions for us? Was he killed in March, or do you now reassess that he actually survived that strike and was killed in Mosul?
Tara, let me tell you where we are on this at this point in time. On July 10th, the coalition conducted a strike on an ISIL leadership meeting near Mosul, as you said, in which we believe that Omar Shishani was present, along with 16 other ISIL leaders. We are still working to confirm the outcome of that airstrike, but again, we do have indications that he was present. And again, we, at the time of the original strike back in March, we made clear at that time that we were still assessing the situation, and at that time thought that he had been killed. And this additional information now has led us to this latest airstrike that took place on July 10th. And what I think is important here, a couple things. One is that this is an individual who has been ISIL's Minister of War. He's a key member of their leadership team, and his removal from the battlefield is a significant blow to ISIL. And it is a step forward for our campaign against ISIL as we continue to target their leadership. And also, if he was in fact at this meeting, it is an indication of the importance that ISIL is now placing on this particular area of Iraq, particularly with the Iraqi forces that have now taken Qara West, and the importance of that ISIL's attaching to it, and certainly we take that as a sign of their the importance that they're placing on that particular part of Iraq. And obviously this is an area of intense focus for the Iraqi security forces, and it will be for the coalition as well moving forward.
Just a couple of follow-ups then. You said if he was at this July 10th meeting, is the Pentagon sure that he was at the July 10th meeting and was killed in that airstrike?
We are still working to confirm the details. We're assessing the situation, and I'm not able to confirm it at this time.
And then just one last follow-up. The Pentagon had said in March that it was certain that he had been killed after looking at the strike, I think about a week after it occurred. When did it become apparent that he had survived the airstrike and got back on y'all's radar screen?
The intelligence that we had at the time led us to believe that he had been killed. We recognized at that time that our intelligence picture was incomplete, so we've been careful, along as we are with all these strikes, to indicate the possibility that that there could have been a different outcome. That is a possibility in this instance, and I'm not going to get into other intelligence about what led us to believe that he may have been at this meeting. But we did have an indication of that, and that's one reason we carried out this strike. And again, there were other ISIL leaders, we believe, at this location at that time, and we believe this was a successful strike, but we do not yet are not in a position to be able to confirm that he was killed. Barbara.
A couple of questions about Russia. I want to make clear from the beginning, I'm not asking you about a hypothetical agreement that hasn't been reached yet, but does the Secretary...
But you might be?
Could be. Does the Secretary now trust the Russian military, the Russian government, well enough to share targeting information, intelligence information, and possibly engage in joint operations? Does he trust them well enough to do that?
The Secretary trusts Secretary Kerry and all those who are having a conversation with the Russians about their role in Syria to do everything they can to try and convince the Russians to do the right thing in Syria. The Secretary has been quite clear that he believes that the Russian activities up until now have been, that they got off on the wrong foot, that they have not targeted ISIL as they said they were going to. And if he has always maintained, Barbara, as you know, that if the Russians were prepared to do the right thing, that would be a good thing.
Right, but that, all due respect, isn't actually the question. He has said that exactly what you said before. I mean, let's just cut to the bottom line here. What is his position on an agreement with the Russians to share classified military information on targeting, intelligence, and possibly engage in joint operations? Is he in favor of it?
The Secretary is in favor, as I said. Secretary Kerry is in Moscow. He's having conversations with his counterparts, and the Secretary supports Secretary Kerry's efforts. As he's also said that he's had questions about the Russian activities up to this point in Syria, and if the Russians are prepared to do the right thing in Syria, then this Secretary of Defense would be open to that conversation. But we're waiting to see what's going on. There's no indication right now. We're not conducting or coordinating any military operations with Russia at this moment, and it's not clear we'll ever reach an agreement to do so.
So, open to the conversation. He is not, I'm taking that to mean Secretary Carter is not yet endorsing the proposal that is being presented to Lavrov by the State Department. He wants to see guarantees from the Russian military.
I'm not going to get into any of the discussions, the negotiations that are going on. What I'm telling you is he supports what Secretary Kerry's doing.
But you've also said that he's open, okay, but then you said he's open to the conversation on it, which suggests he's not yet ready to support an agreement. We don't want to walk out of this room with any misunderstanding of his position.
That's correct. He's supportive of what Secretary Kerry is doing. And again, Barbara, we're not in a position right now to be able to tell you that we have any sort of agreement on that front to consider, and so we're waiting to hear what Secretary Kerry's talks produce. So you're ahead of the game here.
So if, in fact, as we know, part of it is a U.S. proposal to go ahead and bomb al-Nusra targets, where does that leave the U.S. military and this department in terms of supporting opposition to Assad, since al-Nusra, would take away, they're fighting Assad, so you're going to bomb them, and what should the opposition think about all of that? Aren't you really cutting off the moderate opposition inside Syria by doing this?
Well, let me make clear that al-Nusra has been on our target list previously, Barbara. You know that as a remnant of al-Qaeda, it's been on our target list as well. And so I don't, and will continue to be. So let's wait to see what Secretary Kerry, what his conversations produce. We continue to support his efforts, and again, we'll wait to see what the outcome is from his conversations.
Is the Secretary of Defense still skeptical about trusting Russia on all of this?
I think the Secretary of Defense has been clear that he has been skeptical of Russia's activities in Syria, and we have reason for that. There's plenty of reason for that skepticism, and I think he maintains that skepticism, yet at the same time he has always, in all of his engagements and discussions about dealing with Russia, whether it's in Syria or elsewhere, that if Russia can behave in a more positive fashion, that we would be open to that conversation. This is a Secretary of Defense who has an extensive history dealing with the Russians, knows many of their top leaders personally, and has, again, significant experience, and I think that experience lends him to both support what Secretary Kerry is doing and and also to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism on the Russian side.
One very quick other one, I'll be very quick, on
Okay.
Libya. Do you now have approval, and are you prepared, since the government, the emerging political process in Libya appears to be getting closer to producing a viable entity you can work with, are you closer now to the possibility of airstrikes inside Libya in support of the emerging government there and the Misratan forces going after CERT?
We continue to support the Government of National Accord there. We've seen the progress the forces in support of the government are making in Libya. We see that as a very positive thing, and we'll continue our conversation with the Government of National Accord, but I don't have anything to announce from here. Yes, Andrew.
Peter, yesterday on Capitol Hill, there was a top Army official talking about some Army plans to expand or potentially expand the Army force in Europe over the next few years. He talked about adding a fires brigade, division headquarters battalion, engineering battalions, ground element of aviation brigades, and some communications and logistics units. I mean, it sounds like adding that up that he was talking about potentially thousands of more soldiers going over to Europe. Can you give us, tell us what the Secretary's latest thoughts are and conversations have been about potentially increasing the permanent force levels in EUCOM?
I think the Secretary, you've seen our budget submission, you've seen the discussion about force levels, and there's been no change in that assessment from here. Obviously, we've got the steps that we've taken to move along with NATO in terms of this shift from reassurance to deterrence, the ERI initiative and the presence of U.S. forces that will be deployed on a rotational basis. But again, those will be rotations of U.S. forces. So we're not talking about a permanent presence there. Some of the, I'm not sure all the deployments that he was discussing in that testimony, but we think they've been accounted for with the force structure that's been identified. Yes, David, welcome.
Thanks. Do you have any information you can share with us about an airstrike earlier this week along the Syria-Jordanian border by the Russians that hit a camp, I think, and maybe killed 12 people? Were those U.S.-supported moderate rebels in that camp, or do you have any details about that you can give us?
I don't have a lot of details. We've seen those reports as well. I cannot confirm with 100% certainty that that the Russians carried out those strikes, although certainly they have flown in that area before, and as we've talked about from here, they have carried out strikes in that area. But our understanding is these were strikes that did hit moderate opposition forces that have been fighting ISIL, and once again, we think it's counterproductive to the defeat of ISIL to be striking forces that are taking the fight to ISIL. And we also, there's some indications there may have been civilians killed, and so we would obviously have concern with those strikes.
And were they U.S. trained moderate opposition?
I know that these are forces that were in the fight against ISIL, and in that sense, they were a target that, again, is counterproductive to this effort. Yes.
Otto Crutcher, CPR Magazine. On your dealings with the Hill, both House and Senate chairmen have asked for additional funding to support the troops that you have added in Afghanistan and Iraq. Does the department have an idea of when you need? Are you going to submit a request for supplemental funding for those, or do you think you can fit it within your budget? How are you going to pay for those additional troops?
I think this is an area where we're going to continue to have a conversation with Congress about the resource needs with regard to the Afghanistan deployment, the Afghanistan commitment. This is obviously a mission that's been supported on both sides of the aisle, and we'll continue to have a conversation with Congress, and the administration will, about the best way to fund those forces. Yes.
Thank you, Peter. On the United States THAAD system deployed into South Korea, North Korea officially declaration of war against the South Korea and United States. What is the U.S. position on their declaration of war?
I'm sorry, the U.S. position on?
Their declaration of war against the U.S. and South Korea.
Well, we obviously have seen provocative statements from the North Koreans in the past and provocative actions from the North Koreans. And again, we would urge the North Koreans to take every step they can to reduce tensions in the Korean Peninsula. We continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with South Korea and with our allies in the region. The deployment of the THAAD system reflects our commitment to the alliance and the appropriate steps that we're taking with our allies to try and protect against those North Korean provocations. And so we've seen rhetoric from the North Koreans in the past. We've seen actions that we think are counterproductive to peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula. We would again urge the North Koreans to conduct themselves and in a different fashion and to do what they can to reduce tensions in the region.
China continuing opposite deploying THAAD into South Korea, does the United States convincing China and Russia? What are you doing right now? What did you ongoing to talk to the Chinese officially, or?
Well, I don't have particular diplomatic negotiations to read out from here, but we've been clear, as I believe the South Koreans have as well, that the purpose of the THAAD system, it's a defensive system. It is intended to protect against the very real threat that we've seen coming from North Korea, and that the Chinese and the Russians should not have concerns about that system because of the way it's designed and its purpose, which is again to protect against the very real North Korea threat.
Any time frame for deploying THAAD?
We continue to work closely with South Korea, but we don't have a timetable for final deployment at this time. Carlos.
Peter, quick question on Kiara West. The Secretary characterized this the base as sort of a logistical hub for the upcoming push against Mosul. So there have been local reports that there's work ongoing with the runway so that they can accommodate F-16s to conduct airstrikes to expand the range of the fighters into northern Iraq and possibly Syria. Is that the case? Is Cairo West expected to be used as sort of a jumping off point for U.S. airstrikes further north? And if so, how has that approach changed with Turkey's announcement that they will now begin allowing U.S. planes to fly from their bases?
Well, I think what the Secretary said, what we heard from General McFarland, and what we heard as well from Prime Minister Abadi is that the Kiara West will be a staging area in much the same way that we've seen Taqadum play that role, Makmur as well, that this is going to be a staging area that we will obviously work to improve the runway so that it can be both cargo aircraft and other aircraft can use the Kiara West as a launching pad, if you will, for the push towards Mosul. But I think I don't want to get ahead of the operational situation in terms of the use of the airfield, but we absolutely, along with the Iraqis, intend to restore the airfield to a functional state so that not only our aircraft, but potentially Iraqi aircraft as well, can use that as a base of operations. So
functional state, then, does that include accommodating F-16s from the area?
I'm not going to get into what aircraft will be there or not, but we certainly will do everything we can, and we have, and that's part of the 560 people who are deploying. These are people who have particular expertise and skills in exactly what you're talking about. So.
As a follow-up, please, question to Turkey side. Is there any change, there will be any change in the use of Incirlik Air Base in the near future?
I'm not aware of any announcement. I'll leave it to the Turkish government to announce anything on their side, but obviously Incirlik's been a critical part of our operations and will continue to be going forward. But I'm not aware of any change at this point in terms of what operates out of there.
Another Turkey-related question. The Turkish president criticized recently the U.S. administration for delaying the deployment of the HIMARS to Turkey. So can you give us an update about this ongoing negotiations with the Turks about this?
I know that they are, the conversations continue and that the deployment is something we seek to work out as quickly as we can, and that, but we just don't. It hasn't been finalized at this time.
Next month, maybe.
I'm not going to put a date on it.
And the last question on Manbij. Can you give us an update about the siege in Manbij?
Yeah, my understanding is that there's been some pretty intense fighting in Manbij, and the last update I had suggested again that some of the troops, some of the forces trying to remove ISIL from Manbij have entered this center of the city, and there's been some pretty intense fighting. There's been a significant flow of civilians as well trying to leave Manbij, but in terms of the actual situation on the ground, there hasn't been too much movement other than some of those forces have again been able to enter portions of the city, and that continue to make progress, but it has not changed all that much in the last few days.
Can the Syrian Arab forces make a deal with the ISIL to leave the city without any clash, or this kind of negotiations might be possible?
I'll leave it to those forces to describe any negotiations they may be having with ISIL. But right now what we see is fighting. We see ISIL trying to retain that territory and devoting a lot of resources to it, and likewise the Syrian Arab coalition continues to push forward against that, and continues to show a lot of toughness and resiliency in the process.
How many civilians are there in town? Do you have an estimate?
I'll try and get a number for you. So we'll take that question. I'll try and get you an updated number, because I'm sure the number's changed in the last few days. So yes, Courtney.
One more on Kiara. Have any of the 560 troops arrived? Are they there working yet? Other than that one team that went in the surveillance?
Yeah, I'm not at this point, Courtney, and I will double check this, but my understanding is that those additional forces have not yet deployed, but it was going to be, as I think you heard from the Secretary and General McFarland on our trip, was going to be a relatively quick process. And again, the evaluation of the airfield and the steps to improve it, we pretty confident that that will be able to happen relatively quickly.
And then on Russia, can you walk us through what it would take, since the U.S. suspended mill-to-mill with Russia in 2014, what would it take to change that? Would that be what would the Pentagon have to do? Go to Congress for approval, or what legally would need to happen if there was some agreement?
Yeah. I don't want to get ahead of things, Courtney. I don't want to look at, again, a hypothetical situation. We have.
I'm just trying to understand what would happen to reestablish, because that would be a reestablishment of mill-to-mill relations, right?
Not. We don't know, Courtney. First of all, there is no agreement right now. We are not cooperating with the Russians militarily. We have a memorandum of understanding with regard to flight safety. That is the extent of our relations with Russia with regard to military operations, and you know the purpose of that. Nothing's changed. That is our agreement. And at this point, it's not clear that there'll be anything else for us to consider.
I guess just more broadly then, and what does it take when the U.S. has ended mill-to-mill relations with the country? What does it take to reestablish them? Is that something that you have to go for congressional approval, or I'm just asking what's...
Yeah. I'm happy to take that question, because it's more of a legal and legislative question, but I know that we had the authority to enter into the memorandum of understanding with regard to flight safety, and that remains the single agreement we have right now with the Russians with regard to Syria. And there's no other agreement for us to consider at this particular moment in time. And if that changes at some point, I'm sure that we will get the legal and other review that would be required in order for that to happen. But we're not there, and so I think that's looking too far down the road.
Okay, and then if I just one more about Shoshani, when you said that the U.S. had reason to believe that he was at this location that was targeted, the more recent one, not the March time where he was killed, but the more recent time when he was killed, how long has the U.S. had you been tracking him, or was there a belief for a matter of weeks that he was actually alive and that was just never disclosed?
I'm not. My understanding, Courtney, is that this is very recent information, and that we did believe, as we reported in March, that he had been killed. We had indications of that. That was the best intelligence assessment we had at that time, and there was this new indication that he was present at this location, and my understanding was that was very, very recent information.
So the U.S. had not been tracking him for a matter of...
I'm not going to get into intelligence matters, but I'll just describe it in that way, that we believe that the assessment in March was correct, and obviously received indications that he may still be alive. This strike was carried out, and we're trying to determine exactly what's happened. And we've seen, of course, the public reports that he's been killed, but we're not prepared to confirm it right now.
And so just to be clear, it's fair to say that he was the target of this most recent strike. Is that fair?
Yes, that would be fair. Yes, Christina.
Hi, Peter. Thanks. I hope this isn't redundant since I came in a little late. Yesterday you announced there was a June 9th airstrike in Afghanistan that killed the Umar Khalifa, the known terrorist leader with the Tariq Ghadar group. The State Department considers that group a Pakistani Taliban-linked group, but your statement said it was targeting an Islamic State Khorasan province group. So I'm just wondering, is the group Taliban-linked or is it ISIS?
I believe the group is the group is Taliban-linked, as indicated, I think, by the State Department. This individual was with ISIL members at that time, and whether or not they had a more extensive relationship, again, that's not something I can get into from up here.
The Taliban is not considered linked to ISIS, I don't think. It's not considered a terrorist group.
This individual, again, was with those ISIL members at the time of this strike, and the result of the strike resulted in not only his death, but the death of others. Hold on, I'll go to someone who has another question. Yes?
Yeah, on Tuesday, the arbitration court ruled in favor of the Philippines, and China has previously said that they were not going to follow this decision. Has the U.S. Defense Department seen any recent Chinese activity in the South China Sea since the decision was made?
Have we seen any?
Chinese naval activity in the South China Sea?
I believe there's Chinese naval activity in the South China Sea on a regular basis, but I don't believe we've seen anything unusual. But again, we have a presence in the South China Sea. Lots of countries have a presence in the South China Sea. And again, on the decision itself, we would, of course, consistent with our long-standing policy, support the peaceful resolution of these disputes, including the use of international legal mechanisms like the tribunal. And we would hope that everyone in the region would abide by by the results of that ruling.
So no kind of activity that you would characterize as raising tensions since the announcement was made Tuesday?
Again, we've seen, from our standpoint, normal operations in the South China Sea. Yes, Corey.
Peter, just kind of going back to Shoshani for a second. I know you can't get into specific intelligence, but can you clarify broadly how you guys decide if somebody's killed in one of these strikes? Because we only have your, what you guys tell us, and then we have this other strike the other day, and you say he's dead, but how do we know it 2 months from now he doesn't show up as alive again? I'm just.
There's a very rigorous process, Corey, that we go through in the selection of these targets, in assessing all of the circumstances that need to, the test that needs to be met before carrying out that strike. And likewise, there's an extremely rigorous process on the backside of the strikes as well in determining the outcomes. And there is a significant effort made to try and reach a determination as to whether or not that strike was successful. Again, our intelligence at the time of the March strike indicated that it had been successful. And again, we've been presented with indications perhaps it wasn't. This additional strike was carried out. And what I think's, again, most important from our standpoint is that this individual was someone who was a key member of the ISIL leadership team, their Minister of War, someone directly involved in their operations in Iraq and Syria. And his removal from the battlefield, we think, is a significant blow. Courtney?
I guess just, what does it say that if he was reported dead in March and now about 4 months later, he just came back on the grid? I mean, you had no indication in those 4 months at all that he might have still been alive?
Courtney, I'm not going to get into all of our intelligence assessments, but we, again, the intelligence assessment made at that time was that he had been killed, and that's the understanding that we've been operating under since that time. And now we had a more recent indication that he was present at this location. I'm not going to get into the details of exactly how we arrived at that. But we reached that conclusion in March based on the best intelligence we had at that time. And
Why didn't you put out a statement this time? Because you put out a statement, obviously, in March saying that he was believed to be dead and you didn't this time. Was it because it was embarrassing to have him killed twice?
Courtney, I'm standing here telling you I can't confirm for you that he's been killed.
You cannot or can?
I cannot. And I said that at the beginning of this briefing, the first time I was asked about this. We had a conclusion reached in that first strike, and I'm telling you now with the latest information we have based on, again, our assessment of the situation.
Can I ask you one other one about Iraq, too? The Iraqi National Security Advisor went to Damascus on Wednesday and delivered a letter from Prime Minister Abadi saying, declaring the Iraqis' unity with the Syrians, and it said, reportedly it said, the Iraqi army and the Syrian army are one in our fight against terror, or something to that effect. What was Secretary Carter's reaction to that, that 24 hours after he met with Prime Minister Abadi, he dispatched his National Security Advisor to go and meet with the Syrians and declare unity with them when the U.S. continues to say the Syrian regime must go?
I didn't ask for the Secretary's reaction to it, but I will just say this about our conversation with, his conversation with Prime Minister Abadi, that he believes the Abadi government is carrying out the fight against ISIL in an effective fashion, and we're supportive of that, supportive of Prime Minister Abadi's efforts, and I'll leave it to the Iraqi government to describe their relations with other countries.
During their meeting, did Prime Minister Abadi ever bring up, or Defense Minister Abadi ever bring up the idea that they were going to create some sort of an alliance with the Assad regime going against ISIS? Was that a topic of discussion?
That was not a topic of discussion. Okay, I got time for two more.
Yeah, Peter, another question about one of the leaders in Syria who was allegedly killed after the attack. He's one of the leaders of PKK, and he was allegedly commanding the YPG forces in some attacks in northern Syria. His name is Zardal, Fehman Hussein in other name, and according to the press reports, he was targeted and he was killed or wounded. Do you have any confirmation about his status?
I don't have any confirmation on that. Yes.
Going back to South China Sea, have you seen any indication on the side of China that they are preparing for any expansion of the construction activities and works on the Fake Island?
I'm not aware of any indication at this point. Obviously, it's something we'll continue to watch closely, and we would encourage all the claimants in the South China Sea in the wake of this ruling to conduct themselves without trying to provoke their neighbors and continue to conduct themselves in such a way that the tensions over the South China Sea would be reduced as opposed to escalated. And we would, again, urge that of all the claimants. As you know, we don't take sides in these claims, but we do support the peaceful resolution of these disputes, and we believe this ruling presents once again an opportunity for all sides involved in these disputes to try and resolve these through diplomacy and in a peaceful fashion. Okay, I got to talk to some high school students. Oh wait, I have one final note for the press corps, and that is many of you know my senior military assistant, and Rich is moving on to better things. He's got a new assignment, and I just wanted to highlight for you that this is going to be his final day as my SMA. I know he's been very helpful to you all over the last couple of years. He's served 3 assistant to the Secretaries of Defense for Public Affairs, and so if you see him in the hallway, wish him well. It's a tough loss for me. I've got a very able replacement in Lieutenant Colonel Juanita Chang, but Rich has been Rich Spiegel's been a key member of our team and helpful, I think, to you all, and so I just wanted to publicly thank him for his work on our behalf, and my behalf especially. So, thanks.